Managing Data with Power Query in Excel by Tomfragale, a Microsoft Certified Trainer. In this course, I'm going to show you how to use the Power Query to import data from other sources, clean up the data, adding formulas. We'll talk about the append query and the merge query. We'll do the group by query that can give you subtotals, and I'll show you how to automate tasks using the Power Query. The Power Query is a great tool in Excel that really helps you do all of these things. So let's get right into it. I'm going to switch over to Excel. So notice now I'm in a blank workbook. So first, I want to show you how you can use Power Query to import data from other sources. In this case, I'm going to click on the Data menu up above, Data. Oh, and by the way, I try to make my mouse bigger for you so you can find my mouse. And sometimes during the session, I'll make my mouse do that so you can find my mouse that way as well. So I'll click on the Data menu, and I'm going to come over here and click on the word Get Data. Let me show you all the different data sources that you could use, and then I'll show you a couple specific examples. If I pick up the word From File, I can get data from an Excel workbook, a text file, or a CSV. There's other ones there, including PDF and a SharePoint folder. If I pick on From Database, I can get data from SQL Server, Access, Oracle, and a bunch of other databases. From Azure means Microsoft Azure. That's becoming really popular these days. From Power Platform includes Power BI, Data Flows, Dataverse. Online services include SharePoint, Microsoft Exchange, Dynamics, and even Salesforce is there. And there's other sources. And then here you have a catch-all category like ODBC and OLEDB. So if you have data out there somewhere, we should be able to pull it into here. So now each one of these is going to make a formatted table in Excel. So let's start to pull in maybe from a different Excel file. So now, by the way, the Excel file that I'm using should be included with the course. So I'll pick on From File, and I'll pick on From Excel Workbook. And I'm going to point to the Excel file that I did include with this course. And here it is. It's called Student File New. And I'll pick on Import. This is going to open up a window that's called the Navigator. Now, this is going to show you all of the sheets in that Excel workbook. If this was a database, it would show you all of the tables in that database. So I'm going to scroll down and get a table that's called Customer List. Now, this one is not a formatted table in the original Excel workbook. So I'll pick on Customer List. I'm going to come down here and pick on the word Load. Notice how it brings it in as a formatted table. So no matter what data source that you would use, it will bring it in as a formatted table. Now, this window over here is going to help us go further with the Power Query, and we'll get to that in a little bit later on. So now let's try to pull in from an Access database. And this Access database is also included with the course. So I'll click on the Data menu. I'll pick on Get Data, From Database, and you can see Access databases among the list here. So I'm going to go to the folder where I have my Access database. It should also come with the class. And here I have one that's called Sample Data. I'll pick on Import. You're going to get that Navigator window from which you can choose the different tables. So for example, I'll pick on the shippers table, and I'll pick on Load. And now it pulls it in as a formatted table. So clearly Access works. Let's try a text file. So this time I'll pick on the Data menu. I'll pick on Get Data. This one will be under the From File category, and I'll pick on Text. And then I have a text file that should also be included with the course. So I'll pick on import. We see the data for the text file. Now for the text file, you might have to change the delimiter, which is the separator between the fields. Usually it guesses that correct. If you ever use a CSV file, it will be comma. Otherwise, you could pick the appropriate one. So I'll pick on comma there, and I'll pick on load. And that made a formatted table. Now, what if you want to try a SQL Server database? Or in this case, I'm going to show you how to use any ODBC data source. So you would coordinate with your IT team, and they would set up what we call an ODBC driver. So in this case, I'm going to pick in the data menu. I'll pick in the word get data, and then I'll pick on from other sources, and then we have ODBC. Most databases are either ODBC compliant or OLEDB compliant. So I'll pick on ODBC. And then this is the ODBC driver that your IT team would have set up. So I'll pick on SQL, and I'll pick on OK. And now we're going to see the different databases for that SQL Server. So in this case, I'll go to the sample data database, and I'm going to expand DBO, which is database object, and then you will see the tables and the views for that database. So in this case, I'll pick on employee sales, and I'll pick on load. And that's going to pull that right in. All right, so far we did an Excel spreadsheet, an Access database, a text file, a SQL Server database, which I used through the ODBC. Now, another data source that I'd like to show you today is a website. So I'm actually going to go to the internet for a second. I use Google Chrome. And I'm going to go up to yahoo.com. And from yahoo.com, I'll click on Finance. Once I'm on Finance, I'm going to come over here and click on the word Markets. And then once I'm in Markets, I'll pick on, let's say, Stocks Most Active. Now, everybody, not every web page is going to work. It has to be a web page that has a table of data like this one does. We see that table of data. So now I'm going to capture that website name and copy it. Let's see if I can pull it into Excel through the Power Query. So now I'm going to go back into Excel. I'll pick in the data menu again. In this case, I'll pick on Get Data, and then I'll say From Other Sources, and it does say From Web. All right, so I'll go with From Web there. I'm going to paste the website in. Otherwise, you have to type it in, and you have to get it exactly right. So I would rather copy and paste that. I'm going to click OK. It's trying to connect to that website, and it's trying to see if there's any useful data there. Once again, we get the navigator window, and then usually it's the one that says Table 0 or Table 1 or something like that. So I'll click on Table 0, pick on Table 0, and I'll come down here, I'll pick on the word Load, and now let's see if that's going to pull it in. And it did. So today I showed you how to pull data in from an Excel file, a text file, an Access database, an ODBC connection like SQL Server, and even a website. And then if you pick on the data menu, and if you pick on the word Get Data, you'll see a lot more data sources there. So if you have data out there somewhere, we should be able to pull it into here And each one of those is going to make a formatted table. Now, another thing that you can do is you can refresh that data. So you can do this individually. If I right click on that table over here, right click, and then pick on the word refresh, then if the data had changed in the meantime, then you can refresh that data. You can do that with each individual one. You can right click on any one of those and pick on the word refresh. So that's more of a manual refresh. Let me show you more of an automatic refresh. In this case, I'll click on the data menu. I'm going to come over here and pick on the word refresh all. And then I'll pick on the word connection properties. All right, so I picked on data, refresh all, and then connection properties. Then you get this window. So then I can say refresh every so many minutes, and you can change the number of minutes, or refresh the data when opening up the file. So that's more of an automatic refresh, and you can do that with each of the different tables as well. So any of the data sources can be refreshed like that, either manually, or you go into this window and you can pick refresh data every so many minutes, or refresh data when opening up the file, and it'll be more of an automatic refresh. So that was the part of the Power Query where we can import data from other sources. Now in this case, I want to get data that we're going to use for the rest of the course, and I'm going to get it from the Excel spreadsheet. So in this case, this Excel spreadsheet was included with the class. So I'll pick in the data menu, I'll pick on Get Data, From File, From Excel Workbook. Then in this case, I'll go back to the one that's called the Student File New, and I'll pick on Import. Now, you see these top couple tables, or the top couple sheets, they have a different icon than these ones below. It's because these are all formatted tables, and these are not formatted tables in the Excel spreadsheet. So I'd like to import more than one of these. So this time I'll pick on Select Multiple Items, so I can pick more than one. And I'm going to use these top few. So I'll pick on Categories, Customers, Employees, New Shippers, Order Details, Orders For. I'll get Products 3. Now, if you remember, I got the shippers table from the Access database, so I don't need the Access database this time. In this case, I'm just going to pick suppliers. So I have Category 7. First, I picked on Select Multiple Items, so I can pick more than one. Then I have Category 7, Customer 6, Employees 5, New Shippers, Order Details, Orders 4, Products 3, and Suppliers 1. Now, I'm not just going to click on the word load. When you do more than one, you should do this next step. I'm going to click on this pull down where it says load, and then I'll pick on the word load 2. Let's see what happens if I pick on load 2. Then you'll get this other window. From here, I'm going to click the word table. That means each one of those is going to make a formatted table. I'm going to make sure they go into a new worksheet, so each one will go to its own separate sheet. And I'm going to click where it says add this data to the data model. So the data model, you might use that when you get to the Power Pivot. So I'll make sure the word table is checked and the word new worksheet is checked. And you can click on add the data to the data model if you think you're going to use those in what we call the Power Pivot. And I have other courses about the Power Pivot on this platform as well. So I'll click OK. Now this is going to take a few seconds because it's going to try to import all of those at the same time. You can see the wheels are spinning on the right hand side. And now the end result is that all of the tables are there on the right, and you'll see they're each on a different sheet, and they're all made of formatted table. So that was the part of the Power Query where we can import data from other sources. And I showed you 5 different data sources today, and of course there's more than that as well. Now we're going to start dealing with this window on the right hand side. So I'm going to save my spreadsheet now. So say File, Save, and I'll call this one Class 1. So now I'd like to start to show you how you can use Power Query to clean up your data. So notice how we have this window on the right-hand side. Now, if this window closes, which is easy enough to do, I'm going to close that window. Watch, you're going to reopen up that window. Now, by the way, you can use that window with any formatted table. It doesn't have to be data that you imported like that. You can use this next window with any formatted table to get into the other parts of Power Query. So in this case, I'll click on the Data menu, and I'll pick where it says Queries and Connections, and that'll open up that window on the right-hand side. So, any of these techniques I'm about to show you will work with any formatted table. So these are all the ones that we imported in the previous section of the course. Now I'm going to start to go through these and see if we can clean up some of this data. So I'm going to click on the customer list. Okay. Now it is a formatted table here, but on the original Excel workbook, it is not a formatted table. So notice how the column headers are like column 1, column 2, and column 3. And then if you notice, the real field names are on row 1. So watch what we're going to do. I'm going to come over here and right click on the word customer list. And then you pick in the word edit. And then that will bring it into the Power Query editor, which we're going to talk about for much of the rest of the course. Here's the Power Query editor. From here you can clean up the data, add your formulas, and do a bunch of other things that we're going to talk about. So if you notice, it says column 1, column 2, column 3, and then the real field names are on row 1. This is really because this was not a formatted table in the Excel workbook. So if you follow my mouse, I'm going to click where it says use first row as headers right there. And then you'll have the much better field names. So that was necessary because the original data was not a formatted table in Excel. Sometimes I've also had to do that when it's a text file. Now you do see we have the much better field names. So that was called use first row as headers. Now, another thing I'd like to show you in cleaning up the data is splitting this column. I'm going to click on the contact name column. And notice how the first name and the last name are in the same column. So watch how we're going to split it. In fact, it is called split. I'm going to click on the contact name column, and then up here it does say split column on the home tab. Usually it's by a delimiter, which is a separator between the fields. I'll pick on by delimiter. And it found a space there, which is correct. So I'll click OK. Notice now it has contact name 1, 2, and 3. Some of those must have a third name. So I scroll down. Row 30 has a third name right there. If I scroll down further, row 80 has a third name. So that's why we have contact name 1, 2, and 3. All right. So that was called split column. Now, what if I wanted to put those back together again? So I'm going to hold down my Shift key and pick on contact name 1, contact name 2, and contact name 3. By holding down the Shift key, now they're all selected. So I'm going to lift my finger from the Shift key, and I'd like to merge those back together. In fact, it is called merge. This one's going to be on the Add Column menu up at the top. I'll click on Add Column. Then over here, it does say Merge Columns. Okay. Now, when I put them back together again, this time I want to put the space back in. So I'm going to click on the pull down for the separator, and I'll use the space. And then I'm going to give the column a new name. I'll call it contact name. And I'll click OK. Now, if I scroll to the right, we'll see the new column that's called contact name. So these are all great ways to start cleaning up your data. First, under the Home tab, I showed you where sometimes I have to use the first row as headers. That gave us the much better field names. Then here's that split column that we used a couple minutes ago. Then on the Add Column menu, I was able to merge the columns back together again. Now, if you notice, if I go through the different menus, there's a lot of good choices, but I'm not going to. I don't see anything that says undo. So here's how you would undo something if you needed to. You come over here to the right with these applied steps. You can right click on one of those steps and you would say delete or delete until the end, and that'll take those steps away, and then you take it from there. So that really is how you undo something here in the Power Query. You right click on one of these steps over here and you would say delete or delete until the end. That'll take those steps away, and then you take it from there. Now let me show you how to take a look at the data here in the Power Query in a different way. So I'm going to click on the View menu, and then under View, I'll pick where it says Column Distribution. Let's see what that does. So then it tells you for each column how many distinct values there are, how many unique values. So you get that information right away about the different columns. And now let's click where it says Column Quality. And then notice how it'll tell you how many are valid data entries, how many are in error, how many are empty, for example. So if I come over to this column, notice in contact name 3, most of them are empty, right? Because only a couple of them have the actual contact name 3. And that gave us that information for all of the other columns as well. If I look at the region, a lot of them are empty there. Now I can see that 66% of those are empty. All right, so that was pretty interesting. That was under the View menu, and that was called the Column Quality. So right away, you can get some great information about your columns here. And then if I pick on Column Profile, let's see what that does. I'm going to click on let's click on the country column right over here. Then I'll pick on Column Profile. And then it'll tell me right away how many USAs there are. If I move my mouse there, how many Germanys, how many France items, and so on. So when you pick on your View menu, you can get some pretty good information about your columns. I showed you the column distribution, the column quality, and the column profile. Now I'm going to uncheck those. I'm going to uncheck column profile, column distribution, and column quality. But that can give you some really meaningful information about your data. Now I'm going to close this window at the very top. And then typically you want to keep your changes. I'll pick on Keep. So whatever you do in that Power Query window will show up here in the Excel spreadsheet, as you can see. Notice now I have contact name 1, 2, and 3. If I scroll to the right, I'll see the full contact name. Let's see some more examples of cleaning up this data. So I'm just going to go through the tables here and see if there's another place I can clean up the data. Now I see this categories copy table, and I don't really need that picture column. So I'd like to delete that column from that table. I'm going to right click on categories copy, and I'll pick on edit again. That'll bring me back to the Power Query window. So I'm going to click on the picture column, right click on the picture column, and remove it. So that column is now gone. So that's an example of cleaning up the data here. I'm going to close that window, and I'll keep the changes. And then whatever you do in the Power Query window will show up here. I'm just going to keep on going through the tables and see if there's more things I can clean up. Now this table 0 is where I pulled it in from the website. I like to give that table a better name. So I'm going to right click on the table, and I will pick on rename there. So I'll call that one stocks. All right, so we can always rename the table. Now I have this category 7 table. Notice how it's the same information as the categories copy that I have here. So actually, I don't really need the categories copy anymore. That was one that we imported from the text file. But I have the same table here, so I don't really need this other table. I'm going to right click on that table and then pick on delete. It'll delete the table, as you can see. So you do have a lot of flexibility here. So now you see the customers table, and then I have the one that's called customer list up here. That's really the same data. So I don't really need the customer list anymore either. So I'm going to right click on the customer list and pick on delete. I was just showing you those examples to show you some of the other things that the Power Query can do, but I don't really need the table itself anymore. So I'll pick on delete there. Good. I'm going to delete that. Now let me go to this employees table here. Okay. So the employees table has this birth date. I like to calculate the age based on the birth date, and I like to calculate the years of service based on the hire date. Well, these are things that we can do in the Power Query. So I'm going to right click on the employees table, and I'll pick on edit. Now I'm going to scroll over, and I see the birthday column. I'm going to click in the birthday column. You can tell it's a date and time because of this little calendar and the clock right here. And also by looking at the data, we can tell it's a date and time. So when the column has the calendar or the calendar and the clock, that means it's a date or a date and time field. The ABC here means it's a text field. The 1, 2, 3 next to employee ID means it's a number field. So those little icons will tell you what type of field it is. Watch what we can do with the birth date and with really any kind of date field. So I'll click in the birth date column. I'll click on add column up at the top, all right? Add column. And then there are some things I can do with the date. I'll pick on the word date there. These are all built right in. There's ways to break down the year, the month, the quarter, the week, and the day. So you should try some of those. They're really all built right in. But I see that the age is built right in as well. So I'll click on the age. Now it gives me the age, but it's the number of days. Sometimes I want that to be the number of days if this is an aging report. But this time I want that to be the number of years. So I'm going to right click on the word age. Then I'll pick on the word transform. And I'll pick on total years. Now it's the number of years. I like to round that down. So I'm going to right click where it says age, and I'll pick on the word transform. I'll pick on round, and then you'll pick on round down. So within a couple clicks, I was able to generate the age based on the birth date. This is all built right into the Power Query. Let's try that again with the hire date. From the hire date here, I like to get the years of service, so we'll do something similar. I'm going to click on the Add Column menu. I'll click on the word Date. And I'll pick on the word Age again. Now, in this case, I want to rename that column. So I'm going to right-click where it says Age Point 1. I'll pick on Rename. And I'll call that one Years of Service. Good. Now, right now it's the number of days. So to get that to be the number of years, I'm going to right-click on it. I'll pick on Transform, and I'll pick on Total Years. And then I like to round that down again. So I'll right-click where it says Years of Service, pick on Transform, I'll pick on Round, and then round it down. Good. All right, so you can see how these are built right in. Great ways to manage dates. In that case, I got the age and the years of service pretty easily. Now, let's see what else I can do with that birth date. I want to capture each person's birth month. And you're going to see this one's built right in. So I'm going to click on the birth date again. I'll pick on the Add Column menu. I'll pick on the word Date here. And then these are all built right in. So I'll pick on the word Month. And I'll get the name of the month. And now if I scroll to the right, I do have a column that's called Month Name. I'm going to change that to say Birth Month. I'm going to just right click on that column and pick on Rename, and I'll type in Birth Month. So you can really see that the Power Query has lots of ways to clean up your data. And then notice all of those steps are accumulating over here with the applied steps. I'm going to go ahead and close that window, and I'm going to say keep. Okay? And now the changes will apply here. If I scroll to the right, then we'll see the columns are just added in there. The age, the years of service, and the birth month. I'm going to save my work. Now, later on, we'll do something with the new shippers table. Let me go to the order details table. In this case, I want to show you how to do a formula in the Power Query. So I'm going to right click on order details and I'll pick on edit. And now we're back to the Power Query window. Watch how we can add a formula. So I'm going to click on add column at the top and I'll pick on custom column over here on the left. All right, so I picked on add column and then custom column. So you want to give that a name. I'm going to call it line total. And then I'm going to double click on the word unit price. If I double click on that, it'll put that into the formula and I'll say times quantity. So I have the unit price times the quantity. Now, of course, in real life, it could be a bigger formula, but you get the idea of what I'm trying to do. Now, everybody, come over here and click about Learn About Power Query Formulas, and you'll see more examples of this. All right, so you should go through this window and you'll find more examples of the formulas. And there's even functions here that you can use as well. So that'll give you some idea to do some more formulas. I'm going to go back into Excel. All right, so I have the unit price times the quantity. It's going to give us the line total. I'll click OK, and there's the line total there. Now, if you want to see that formula, then you can come over here on the applied steps, and you look for when it says added custom. I'm going to click on that settings wheel, and then you can see or view, change the formula. So make sure you see that. I'll click OK. I'm going to close that window at the very top, and I'm going to keep my changes. And now, in just a second, when the data refreshes, we'll see that formula in the Excel spreadsheet as well. And there it is. I'm going to keep on going through these tables. I'll pick on the orders table. Now here, I like to have a couple more of those formulas. So I'm going to right click on the orders table and I'll pick on edit. Let's see another one of those formulas. So in this case, I want to see how many days it took to ship. So I'll pick on the add column menu. I'll pick on custom column. I'm going to call it days to ship. On this window, I'll double click where it says ship date, type in the minus sign, and double click where it says order date. So if you subtract one date from another date, it'll give you the difference in days. Then, of course, you can click about Learn About Power Query Formulas over here to see more examples. I'll click OK. Now, it does have the days to ship column over here, but I don't really like the way that looks. So watch what I'll do. I'm going to right click where it says days to ship. I'll say transform into days format. And then that'll look a whole lot better. Right, but that was a pretty quick formula. I'm going to close that. Let's do another formula on this table. So once again, I'll pick on add column with the custom column. I like to get the new total. So the new total, if I scroll down over here, I'm going to double click on the word freight, and that puts that into the formula. I'll type in the plus sign, and then scroll down further and double click on order amount. So I have freight plus order amount. Of course, there could be a bigger formula, but you get the idea of what I'm trying to do here. And I'll click OK. And now I have the new total over here. Now remember, to see those formulas, I'm going to come over here where it says add a custom or add a custom one, whatever it's going to say. Then I'm going to click on the settings wheel to the right, and there I can view or change that formula. So I'm going to close that window. And now I'm going to close the window up at the top. And we'll keep our changes. Let's do another one of those formulas. This time, I'm going to go into the products table over on the right. I'll pick on products. and right click on the products table and then pick on edit. Let me show you another kind of formula. This is more like an if statement. So I'm going to click on the add column menu up at the top. All right, add column. This time I'm going to pick where it says conditional column right there. All right, conditional column. And then you're going to get this kind of window. So I'm going to call the column name reorder. Do I want to reorder that or not? And then we have the line that says if. For the column name, I'll choose the units in stock. For the operator, instead of equals, I'll say is greater than or equal to. Now I'm going to click on this ABC 1, 2, 3 because you can compare it to a table, or you can compare it to a value or a column. I'm going to say select a column. Then I'll click over here and I'm going to compare that to the reorder level. If the units in stock is greater than or equal to the reorder level, that means I have enough of those for right now, so I don't have to order that one right now. I'm going to come over here and I'll type in no. That'll be the response for that function. You can make it more complicated by adding more clauses. It's almost like a nested if in Excel, and you can have as many clauses as you want. Then I want to see if it's actually discontinued. So on the line that says else if, I'm going to click on the first pull down and I'll say discontinued. Equals is fine this time. I'm going to come over here and type in true. If discontinued equals true, then it is discontinued, so I don't need to order that one. I'm going to come over here and type in no. Otherwise, I'll come down here and type in yes. So everybody, this is called a conditional column under the Add Column tab of the Power Query. And it's where we can make an if statement. And you can make it more complicated by adding more clauses. And you can have as many clauses as you want. So let me check my logic. If the units in stock is greater than or equal to the reorder level, that means I have enough for right now. So no, I don't have to order that one. Else if discontinued equals true, that means it is discontinued, so I don't have to order that one. I have no over there. Otherwise, yes. That looks pretty good to me. I'm going to click OK. Notice how I have a new column that's called reorder. This one says no, because I have 39 in stock. 10 is the reorder level, so I don't need any. It's not discontinued, so no, I don't have to order that one. The next one says yes, because we have 17 in stock. 25 is the reorder level, so I need some. It's not discontinued, so yes, I want to order that one. Now look at this one down here. It says discontinued here. I mean, the discontinued is true, and that's why it says no here. So it looks like the logic worked out. Now, if you want to go back into that formula, I'm going to come over here and click on the settings wheel next to where it says add a conditional column, and then we're back to this kind of window from which we can change or view the formula. I'm going to pick on cancel here. So to add a new column in the Power Query, earlier I showed you the custom column, and then that was called a conditional column. I'm going to close that window, and we'll keep our changes, of course. And now when the data refreshes, then if I go to the right, I'm sure I'll see the reorder field. So in that part of the class, I wanted to make sure that we cleaned up the data, we added the formulas. Next, I want to show you a couple special queries. So an append query is where we can combine two tables into a larger table. Let's try an append query. So I'm going to go back into Excel. I have this table that's called shippers. There's the shippers table there. And notice how the shippers table has records 1, 2, and 3. Then I have this other table that's called new shippers. And new shippers has record 4. And notice how they have the same kind of fields. So watch how I can quickly combine these with what we call an append query. I'm going to right click on the shippers table here, and I'll pick on append. And that'll start off the append query. Usually I do it with 2 tables, but in real life I could do it with 3 or more tables. In this case, I'll pick on two tables. The first table will be shippers, and the second table will be the new shippers. All right, so I have the shippers and the new shippers. Obviously, it's going to be tables that have common fields. I'm going to come over here and click OK. Now, the new table has all four of the records, as we can see. Right, so that worked out very well. Now, I'd like to give the new table a better name. So I'm going to come over here where it says append 1, and I'll call it all shippers. I'm going to close that window, and we're going to keep our changes. Now, in just a second, I'll have a new table that's called all shippers, and you can see it has all four of the records. So that was pretty good, everybody. I was able to right-click on the shippers table, and then I picked on the word append, and that's called an append query. Helps you combine two or more tables into a larger table. Now, let me show you another way to combine your tables. This is going to be called a merge query. If I come over here, I'm going to click on the products table. There's products. So the products table has a list of all the products, including the product ID, the product name, the supplier ID, and the category ID, and so on. This one has the category. This one has the supplier ID, but not the supplier name. If I scroll over to the right, the last field here is that reorder field that we just did. Now I'm going to come over here and pick on the suppliers table. The suppliers table has the supplier ID and all the additional information about the supplier. Notice how these two tables have a common field. They both have the field supplier ID, which is really necessary to do this merge query. So let's see if we can make this work. So the merge query is going to make a big table using all the fields from the products table combined with all the fields from the suppliers table. So I'm going to right click on products over here, and I'll pick in the word merge. And then I'll start the merge query. Notice how I have the products table up at the top. Then I'm going to come over here and click on the suppliers table. And then you're going to tell what the common field is. So I'll click on supplier ID here, and I'll pick on supplier ID here. So the two tables do have to have a common field. Now in real life, they don't have to have the same field name. Many times they don't have the same field name, as long as the data is the same. It's always nice when they do have the same field name, but it's not necessary as long as the data is the same. At this point, I'll click OK. It'll take us back into the Power Query window. Remember how the last field in the products table was called reorder, so there that is. Now we have to expand the second table. So I'm going to come over here and click on this icon to the right of the suppliers table right there. Now you can pick and choose as many fields as you wanted to, but I'm going to choose all of the fields. So I'll click OK. And now it just expanded that second table. So now this new table has all the fields in the products table and all the fields in the suppliers table in one big table. It knows what supplier goes with which product because of that common field. So clearly that common field was really important. Now I'm going to come over here and give the new table a better name. I'm going to call it products and suppliers. I'm going to close that window. And of course I want to keep my changes. And now in just a second, I'll have a new table that's called products and suppliers, and that's really the merge of the two tables. So the way I started that, I right-clicked on the products table and I picked on merge. And then it took us to the other screen. Then you would choose the second table and make sure you tell it what the common field is. And now the end result is the new table has all the fields from both the products table and the suppliers table. It knows what suppliers goes with which products because of that common field. So that was another way to combine your tables together using the Power Query. Now, let me show you another special query. This is going to be called a group by query. And here we can get subtotals from our data. Now, in this case, everybody, I like to copy the orders table. So I'm going to come over here and right-click on the orders table. And I'm going to pick on duplicate. And that'll make a copy of that table. And it actually brought us directly into the Power Query here. Now, if I look down here at the bottom, it says 830 rows. So there's 830 individual orders. Now, I'm going to click on this pull down where it says Customer ID, and then we have the classic sort and filter. So I'll pick on Sort Ascending, and then we see how there's multiple orders for the same customer. This customer has 6 orders, this one has 4, this one has 5 or 6, and so on. Watch how quickly I can get a subtotal for each customer. So on the Home tab of the Power Query window, I'm going to pick where it says Group By, which really means we could do totals from our data. I'll pick on the word Group By, and now we're on this window. Now here, I do want to subtotal each customer. So I have Customer ID there. Right below that, the new column name, I'm going to type in subtotal. Where it says count rows, I'm going to click there, and then you have different types of math. I'll do a sum. And then here where it says order ID, I'll use order amount. That's the field I want to subtotal for each different customer. So here I have customer ID. Below that I have subtotal. Here I have sum. And then here I have order amount. So what am I asking for? I'm saying for each different customer, let's get a sum of the orders. Notice before I click OK, right now I have 830 rows, or 830 individual orders. So I'll click OK. Now I have 89 rows, 1 row for each different customer, and now I have a subtotal for each customer. So that was called a Group By query, and it's really a great way to do subtotals out of your data. So I'm going to close that window, and I'm going to keep the changes. And now in just a second, we'll see a new table. Actually, it's going to be called Orders for version 2. I'll change the name of that. See how it says Orders for version 2 over there? So I'm going to right click on that table. I'll pick on rename. I'm going to call this one Order Totals. And I'm going to pick on rename there. And that's fine. Let's do another Group By query. So I'm going to copy this table that's called Products and Suppliers. So I'm going to right click and I'll pick on duplicate there. And that'll bring us back into the Power Query. So this time, for each different supplier, I want to get the, let's say, the sum of what we have in stock for that supplier. So I'm going to come over here and I'll pick on the supplier company name. And let's say I'm going to sort on that. I'll pick on the pull down, I'll say sort ascending. And now we can see there's many for the same supplier. I'm going to go back to where it says Group By. And we're back to this window. So here I have the company name. Here I'll do a subtotal. Or the field will be called subtotal. In this case, I'll pick on sum. And then for the column, I'll choose the units in stock. So I want to see the units in stock for each different supplier, just as an example. I'll click OK. Now before I click OK, notice that there's 96 rows. I'll click OK. And now there's only going to be 29 rows, 1 for each different supplier. And now I have a subtotal for each supplier. Now I can also rename it over here. So I'm going to call this one Total by Supplier. I'm going to close that window. I'll keep the changes. And now, in just a second, we'll see a new table here that'll be called Total by Supplier. So you can see the real benefit of the Group By query. It allows us to do subtotals. Next, I want to show you how you can use the Power Query to automate repetitious tasks. So let's say you have several files that are laid out in the same way, and you have to keep on doing the same things to these files, well, we can use the Power Query to actually automate some of those tasks. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to go back into Excel now. Now I'm going to save this workbook, and I'm actually going to go to a blank workbook for this one. So I'll pick on File, New, and make a blank workbook. Now I want to open up just a plain Excel file. I'll pick on File, Open, and I'll pick on Browse here. So now I'm going to go to this folder that I have that's called Sales Files. And I'm going to open up one of these. Now these files are all laid out the same way. And that's the only thing that's in that particular folder. And that's really kind of an important point. These files have to be laid out in a similar way, and they have to all be in that folder, and they can be the only thing that's going to be in that folder for this to work. So let's say you get this report from corporate every month, and you have to strip it down so you can do further processing with it. So for example, we remove the first few rows here. We would get rid of some of these blank columns. Maybe we can total the rows going across there. But you have to do that each month, and you have to do that for all the files in that folder. So it can really be a lot of time. However, if you do what I'm about to do in the Power Query, this can really help you automate those steps. So I'm actually going to close this file. All the files in that folder will look similar, except they're for different people. So I'm going to close that window, and I'm going to start from the blank spreadsheet again. In this case, I'm going to start off the Power Query. So I'll pick in the Data menu. I'll pick where it says Get Data, and then From File, and then From Folder. Now you're going to point to the folder that has all the files that are laid out in the same way. So in my case, I'll pick on my desktop, and then I've included these files in the with the course as well. So I would recommend that you put these files in its own folder so you can do this. You can replicate what I'm going to show you. So I have this folder that's called Sales Files. So you pick on the actual folder, and I'll click on Open. Now it's going to show you all 5 of those files, or it could be as many files there in that folder as you would need. And it's going to automate all of those, really. Now watch my mouse. I'm going to come down here and click on the word Combine. That really means it's going to make one big file out of all of those. And then I'm going to say Combine and Transform Data. Right there. Combine and Transform Data. Now it's looking at those sheets. It's looking at those workbooks. And notice that they all have an order form sheet. So this is the common sheet between all of those files. And I'm going to click on OK now. Now it's going to bring us into the Power Query. So what's going to happen is anything that you do to this first file is going to happen with all of the files. All right. So now these are some more ways that the Power Query can be used to clean up the data. I'm going to delete column 1. I'm going to right click on column 1 and delete that. I'm going to right click on column 3 and remove that column. And even column 4 doesn't have anything that's meaningful. So I'm going to right click on column 4 and remove that column. Okay, good. I'm looking at the source name over here. I like to split that. So I did a split earlier in the class, but we're going to do another one so I can capture the person's name and also the year. So I'm going to click on the source name. Then I'll pick on the split column choice that I showed you earlier. And this one will be by a delimiter. And I'm looking for that dash actually. So I'm going to click on the pull down and I'll pick on the word custom. I'm actually looking for where the dash and the space are. So everything after the dash and the space is really the person's name. So I'll click OK. Good. So I don't need the source name 1 anymore. I'm going to right click on that and remove that column. It did a good job of separating the name. And then here, I want to separate this column where the period is. So I'm going to click on that column. I'll pick on split column again by the delimiter. And it already found the period there. And I'll click OK. Good. I'm going to rename that column to be called year. Well, we'll rename the column in a couple minutes. And then I'm going to get rid of this column. We'll remove it. Notice how all of these steps are accumulating over here. And that's going to be important for the automation part. Now, the next thing I want to do is get rid of these top 5 rows. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I want to remove 5 rows. So here on the home ribbon, I see remove rows within the Power Query. I want to remove the top rows, and I'll type in the number 5 there. I'll click OK. Good. Now we're going to do that thing. If you look at row 1, it has the actual field names that I want to use. So I'm going to use that thing I showed you before. Use the first row as headers. Now we have the actual field names. Now I want to right click on this column, and we're going to rename that column. I'm going to call that one year. All right, so it's coming together. Now let's see some other things I'd like to do in this data. I'm going to scroll over. Now I want to make sure that these are all number fields. So first of all, you see the word null there? I want to replace the word null with zeros. So I'm going to click on the January column, hold down the Shift key, scroll over to the right, and then click on the December column so all of those are selected. Then let's see. I'm going to pick on Transform up here. I'm going to replace the values. I'll pick on Replace Values. So I want to type in the word null and replace that with a 0. I'll click OK. Now where it said null, it now is a 0. And I want to make sure that those are all, I want to make sure that the data type for those fields is all numbers. So I'll make them currency fields. Good. So notice what happened. All the fields from January over to July, now they're all numbers. I'm going to do that replace again. So I'll pick on Replace Values, null to 0, just in case. I still see some nulls there. And now that should have done the trick. All right, very good. So now let's see what happens when I close this window, everybody. Notice how all the steps are accumulating on the right-hand side. So I'm going to close the window, and I'm going to keep my changes. Now watch what's going to happen. It'll actually process all of those files in that folder at the same time. And that's where the automation occurs. So notice how I have records for Katie McKnight, Courtney, Lorena, Megan, and Zane. That happened all the way down. Now I still want to do some more things to this file. So first of all, I want to give that column a better name. I want to call that salesperson. Then if I scroll down, I see some extra rows still. So if the item is blank, or if it says the word salesperson, or if it says the word item, I want to remove those. Okay, so we'll get rid of those rows. And then also, over here on the right, I want to sum up those columns. So we're going to go back and do some more steps this time. I'm going to right click on the sales file query, and I'll pick on edit. And that'll bring me back into the Power Query. Just keep in mind all these steps are accumulating. Now, first of all, I'm going to right click on that column, and I'll pick a rename. I'll call that one salesperson. Good. Now, I'm going to click on the pull down where it says item, and then we can sort and filter that field. So I'm going to uncheck the ones that say null. If it says item there, the ones that say please enter, and the one that says salesperson. So in other words, I don't want to show those rows. I want to take those away. That'll be good. I'll click OK. So that took those rows away. And now I want to make a new calculation that'll add up all of those columns. So remember in an earlier lesson of this course, I talked about how to make a calculation in the Power Query. In this case, I'll pick on Add Column. We'll do one of those custom columns. And I'll type in the word total here. Now the total, I'm going to type in, I'm going to double click on January plus February plus March plus April plus May plus June plus July plus August plus September plus October plus November plus December. So another one of those calculations like we talked about before. And I'm going to click OK. So I have January plus February. Oh, I need a plus sign between the word February and March. That's better. And I'll click OK. Now I do have a total on the right. And again, notice how all the columns are accumulating, all the steps are accumulating over here. I'm going to right click on, I'm going to close that window, keep the changes. So now let's see what we have. It actually processed all of those files in that folder, and now I have clean data, and now it's just added the total column. If I scroll down, now I have clean data for all 5 of those files, and now maybe I can bring that into a pivot table or process that data in many ways. So what's going to be significant about this, everybody? Let me save this, and I'll call that one sales data. All right. What's significant about that is, let's say I get more files the next month. So I'm going to go back into that actual folder here on my computer, and I'll pick on my desktop, and I see the folder that's called Sales Files. Let's say the company is always sending new files every month. So as I accumulate more files there, or even if those files get updated, all I have to do is come back into this workbook and then right click on this query and then refresh it. And then it'll run it for all of the new files, or even if they replace some of those existing files. And then I just automated that whole process. And now I have clean data that I can work with at that point. So the way I got all of that started, all the files that have a similar layout have to be in a folder by themselves. And then we picked on data, and then get data, from file, and then from folder was that choice. That means it is going to process all of those files in that folder at the same time. That brought us into the Power Query, and then from there I was able to automate all of those steps, and it worked on all of those files. So everybody, hopefully you enjoyed the course about the Power Query. We talked about how to import data from other sources, how to clean up the data, how to add the formulas. We did the append query, the merge query, and we did the group by query for the subtotals. And then I showed you how you can automate your steps in the Power Query as well. Thanks for watching the course.